Hello champions, my name is Guy, welcome back to my channel. Do I need a haircut? Yes. Was I wearing pajamas all day up until about 5 minutes before recording this video? Also yes. But you see, the thing is, I am a professional gamer, and professional gamers don't need to change their clothes, and they don't need haircuts, Mom. I've been playing Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I really enjoy it, and today I have a Zelda theory for you guys. I did one Zelda theory before. I don't know why this is becoming a Zelda theory channel. Needless to say, huge spoiler warnings for the story of Tears of the Kingdom. If you haven't played it and you care about spoilers, get the freak out of here, dude. Today, I have a Zelda theory about the timeline placement of Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. If you haven't finished the game, you might be thinking to yourself, timeline placement? It takes place after Breath of the Wild, you freaking dork. If you have played the game, you know that in the beginning of the game, after finding a mummified Ganondorf, Zelda gets sent back in time. Throughout the story, Link travels across Hyrule and collects these dragon tears, which manifest in the form of memories, where Link gets to see a glimpse into what Princess Zelda experienced in the time that she went back to. We are going to be theorizing about what time she was sent back to, and I believe I've gathered enough evidence to pinpoint where in the timeline she is sent back to. Let's start off with a small set of implications, if you will. First off, we are going to assume that all of the games in the timeline did happen. There's a theory out there that it's called the Legend of Zelda because they are all essentially legends told within a universe. We are not going to be ascribing to that theory. We are going to be ascribing to the fact that these all did happen in universe. Next, when Zelda first meets Queen Sonia and King Rauru of Hyrule in the past, they introduce themselves as the founders and the first king and queen of Hyrule. We are going to assume that they are telling the truth. We've not received any indication that they would have any reason to lie about this fact. And lastly, this Ganondorf is not this Ganondorf. I will get into that in just a minute, but we're going to operate under that assumption. As far as I see it, there are 3 possible timeline placements that Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom could take place in, assuming these things are true. First off, boom, before Skyward Sword. For the uninitiated, the end of Skyward Sword sees Link and Zelda establishing the Kingdom of Hyrule on the surface after descending from the islands in the sky above. That means there was a Kingdom of Hyrule before the events of Demise's War? What's that a war called?
I didn't finish my thought there. What I was trying to say is, in this timeline placement, there would have been another Kingdom of Hyrule that existed before Demise destroyed the world and Hylia raised the islands into the sky, and then after Link and Zelda came down, they started a new Kingdom of Hyrule.
Next timeline placement is shortly after Skyward Sword. Another assumption we can make based on that same story is that Link and Zelda descended to the surface and they established a civilization, but it was not necessarily known as the Kingdom of Hyrule. And instead, the first actual king and queen of the Kingdom of Hyrule were these two right here. Last place that we can put the timeline, really could go after any of the games, but we're gonna just put it down here just for the visual of it, is at some point during these events, or after these events, the Kingdom of Hyrule fell, and then was reformed by King Rauru and Queen Sonia, thus also making them the founders and first king and queen of Hyrule after this one fell.
Another quick aside, I do want it really quickly noted that I do see right there on the Era of Prosperity, it says the Kingdom of Hyrule founded. I don't think this totally solves the placement of the timeline, because I think all the theories still could be true, and I think the fact that Sonia didn't recognize the name Zelda when Zelda introduced herself, or at least didn't seem to react to it, is a little bit more of an indication that this might have been a different foundation of a different Kingdom of Hyrule.
Now, how do we go about clarifying which one of these 3 timelines it takes place in? Well, first, let me go back to my point about it being 2 different Ganondorfs. How do we know it was 2 different Ganondorfs? Well, if King Rauru and Queen Sonia truly are the first king and queen of Hyrule, then Ganondorf was sealed either up here or down here. Yet, there's a Ganondorf right here. This Ganondorf dies in all 3 of these timelines at some point. The only way that he could exist down here is if at some point he was resurrected. Granted, that's a possibility. More likely, I think that if it was up here, Ganondorf was sealed, has existed all of this time while this other Ganondorf went and did his thing, and then reawakened at the end of the timeline. So that's just a bit of a clarification that really still does not narrow down exactly when in one of these 3 timelines it takes place. So let me move on to my next point of the day, and that's going to be the bloodline of Princess Zelda and the goddess Hylia. So as we kind of learned before, Hylia sacrificed her mortal form, becoming a mortal. The mortal she turned into was the first Zelda. Ever since that point, could have started later, but I believe ever since that point, every baby girl born into the Hyrule royal family was named Zelda as tradition, and later a law, apparently. That's kind of weird. So as far as we know, from this point on, all the baby girls should have been named Zelda. Yet, we have King Rauru and Queen Sonia, who state that they have a blood connection, even saying that she detects Rauru's light power and her own time power, implying that she is a direct descendant of these two. These two must have had a kid somewhere off screen that we didn't know about. So it begs the question, why is she named Sonia and not Zelda? Well, I do think that there's a couple possibilities. One, that takes us in a place before the events of Skyward Sword, where Hylia had not yet become Zelda. Or two, after the other theoretical fall of the Kingdom of Hyrule, the tradition was lost for a while before being re-established later. Now, this is actually the fourth time recording this video. During one of my other videos, I actually had a thought, and it's the theorized possibility that Queen Sonia becomes the first Zelda. As we see in Tears of the Kingdom, Queen Sonia, yeah, she gone. We never learned that the goddess Hylia, when she sacrificed her immortality to become Zelda, we never get any implication that it was still like her same form. Like the goddess Hylia literally just went whoop, and then she was Zelda, you know what I mean? It's very possible that she reincarnated into somebody. Now, if we had a vessel who already contained an immense amount of time power and whose body was no longer being used, to be frank, is it possible that Goddess Hylia used the blood or body of Queen Sonia to become the first Zelda, storing her spirit in this new form that was, as far as we know, not being used? It's possible. I'm not saying it's likely, but it's just something interesting to think about. And if that was true, that would put it pre Skyward Sword. Now, my last major piece of evidence that I have is in relation to said Sky Islands. As we learn in Skyward Sword, Goddess Hylia raised the land of Skyloft into the sky along with the Hylians and the Triforce, and this was so that she could fight Demise with the remaining people of the surface and make sure that the hero and the bloodline were safe up in Skyloft. But there's something very interesting we learn in Tears of the Kingdom, and as you can see in Tears of the Kingdom, oh shit, I almost just fell over. There's a lot of Sky Islands. The explanation provided in-game is found in a quest called the Legend of the Great Sky Island, where we learn the Temple of Time and the land it sits upon were once found on the surface of the world. This has changed. Its lands and the lands surrounding it now float in the sky. There is a reason for this. The hero who will defeat the Demon King will one day awaken at this very site. This site must be kept safe from the Demon King and his followers. It was therefore raised high into the skies. The tremendous power of the sages accomplished this feat long ago. Now, is it a stretch to infer that these are possibly the same event? Could we reasonably assume that the event that led to the raising of these islands is the same that led to the raising of this island? We do have two conflicting explanations. One, that Skyloft was raised by the goddess Hylia. Two, that these islands were raised by the sages. But there is actually another piece of Zelda lore that has a very eerily similar explanation. And that's the Master Sword. As the games were coming out, obviously there was not like a firm timeline established, and the first lore we learn of the Master Sword was that it was crafted by the sages long ago to be the blade of evil's bane, but we learn in Skyward Sword that the Goddess Sword was created by Goddess Hylia, and then Link took it to the 3 sacred springs, tempered it, and it became the Master Sword. Skyward Sword is really where a lot of this lore comes from. So those are two conflicting explanations in a very similar vein to the Sky Islands. But how can both be true? It's never stated that Hylia worked alone. It is extremely possible that Hylia had a team of elemental sages around her that represented the different parts of Hyrule. As far as the Master Sword, it's highly possible that Hylia and the sages together all used their power to craft this. Granted, we're told these stories in universe, so it's very possible that the people in universe were wrong, but it's not unlikely. Could we infer that the islands were raised by the same method? Perhaps the memories of Tears of the Kingdom are very shortly before the stories of Skyward Sword. Perhaps it's even the same sages that helped Hylia create the Goddess Sword that helped Hylia raise the islands into the sky. I don't think it's out of the question. Given the evidence of the Sky Islands and the fact that she is named Queen Sonia, not Queen Zelda, I think the most likely answer for where the memories fit in on the timeline is above Skyward Sword. Now let me give you a quick recap of the events as I think they may have happened. Before Skyward Sword, you have King Rauru and Queen Sonia who freshly established this new kingdom of Hyrule. They gather some sages who represent the species of the world, as well as representing the various elements, and they are a sort of council ready to stand against evil at a moment's notice. A man from the desert named Ganondorf comes and swears fealty to the royal family, but it was all a ruse as he shink on Queen Sonia and takes her secret stone, becoming Demon King Ganondorf. Over however long this battle takes place, the sages, Zelda, and King Rauru all stand against Demon King Ganondorf, eventually ending with Rauru using his power to seal Ganondorf beneath what would later become Hyrule Castle. Now, shortly after this, we can maybe infer that even Ganondorf was acting as an agent of Demise, whether directly or indirectly. Demise might be like,
fine, I'll do it myself.
And he rampages across Hyrule. No longer having the powers of light and time, the goddess Hylia comes down to intervene herself and lead this battle. She eventually realizes, we're fucked. I have to use the Triforce to wish Demise away because the powers that be are no longer strong enough to take him on. And she reincarnates into a mortal form, maybe into one of Rauru and Sonia's children, or maybe she directly takes the blood from the two of them and creates a mortal form for herself, and she wishes on the Triforce to seal Demise away. She and the sages use their power to raise all of these islands in the sky as a safeguard and create the Goddess Sword, which they'd later know will become the Master Sword, and they know the Master Sword is going to be important because Zelda has it in the past. Islands are raised into the sky, Skyloft is raised into the sky, the lineage of Hyrule is established, and we have a bunch of Zeldas from that point. Now, while Ganondorf is sealed, a new Ganondorf appears, pulls some similar bullshit, wins, takes over Hyrule, the timeline splits, blah, 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 blah. Breath of the Wild happens, Tears of the Kingdom happen, and the mummified Ganondorf from this game is released, and we have the game. While I think it's maybe not the most airtight theory, I do think placing these memories before the events of Skyward Sword adds a lot of really interesting nuance to the events of the Legend of Zelda timeline. A few discrepancies is the races we see Hylia fight alongside include the Magma and the Kikwi, and a couple other guys which we do not see present in Tears of the Kingdom. However, maybe the Magma do exist in Tears of the Kingdom. There are these statues that look kind of similar in the depths, and the Magma are digging people. The Rito, there's already really not an explanation for why the Rito are in Breath of the Wild, but it doesn't really matter because it's been 10,000 years, they can exist if they want. The existence of certain species in the Legend of Zelda timeline really does not pose a lot of issues when you realize that so much of it is just magical. I think that this theory provides a lot of really interesting nuance to the Zelda timeline, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think. If you have any thoughts or questions, please leave them in the comments. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you want to become a champion too, and you'll get a pizza. Jesus. I'll see you in the next one.